Welcome to another episode of the Point by Point Tennis Podcast. With you are your hosts, Carlos and Jishnu. And on today's show, what we're going to be covering is a little bit of everything. The month of February, you would think that there isn't too much going on in the tennis world because the Australian Open has passed, Indian Wells and Miami haven't started. So there shouldn't be too much to talk about, but actually, there is quite a bit to talk about. There were upwards of 20 tournaments in the past month, and we have some important storylines developed from those tournaments. And we also have a very high-profile match, right, which also doubled as the return of Rafa after his injury. He played a match with Carlos Alcaraz, as you can see from my background, and I actually was there live. So I went down there to see. As a big Rafa fan, I've actually been very lucky to see everybody in the big three, big four, even big five if you include Stan and Murray multiple times, right? I've seen Federer multiple times. I've seen Djokovic multiple times. Same for Stan and Murray, but never ever have I seen Rafa live. So I was like, you know what? I have a guaranteed shot to see him because there's no way he can be eliminated or anything like that. This is just one match. So I'm going to hop into that plane and I'm going to go there. And it's good because we can use it for content in the tennis podcast. So, or our tennis podcast. So we're going to discuss that today, both on kind of what the match looked like, but also just in general of just seeing these two players together on the court and sharing this exhibition event that was on Netflix. So it's pretty interesting. So we're going to cover that. We have a little bit of news that we're going to talk about as well. And then all of this is just to sort of lay the land right for the listeners, for those that are interested in seeing who's relevant, coming into Indian Wells, which is starting actually tomorrow. So the draw is out. We're not covering the draw today, but stay tuned in our feeds. We are going to cover the draw in another episode separately. So this episode is going to be all about catching you up on who's important, like who has momentum, who doesn't. For Indian Wells, and we'll do a separate episode discussing just the draw. So stay tuned for that. But without further ado, we can jump in right into it. And we can actually just start with the Alcaraz Nadal match. I think on the women's side, there was actually some big events that happened. We had the first two Masters 1000 events of the year. We're going to talk a little bit about if that's a little bit too much to have two Masters 1000 in February right before two other Masters 1000s coming back to back in the Sunshine Double. So we'll discuss that, and I think I want to give that its proper importance. But given the fact that I just came back from Las Vegas watching this match and the importance of Rafa for tennis history, right? This might be one of the last few times that we get to see Rafa play, competitive or exhibition or otherwise, right? So I think we should start with that. What do you think, Jish?
Absolutely. It's a pretty high-profile match, too, playing Alcaraz.
So, yeah, definitely. So maybe before we even discuss the match itself, I want to see how different it was for you and me. I was there in person, and you saw it through the production, right?
Yeah.
You were able to catch a little bit of commentary. And I'm curious to see what that contrast was. Do you want to start us out with just your thoughts on the broadcast and how the production was from the TV perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty well done from the viewer behind the TV. I think it did start a little late from when it was expected. So there's sort of like a countdown. So I had to kind of, I was like, okay, I'll do something else while this gets started. But, Agassi was there, Roddick was there, a few other commentators were covering the match. And I actually really enjoyed Agassi's commentating. It was,
nice.
Yeah, he is very insightful. He had some good, he could tell he was a really good tennis player, which he obviously is. So he's really dissecting the game from a different perspective. And Andy Roddick was also there giving his 2 cents about, how these two players stack up. So it was actually very exciting and Jim Courier was also there
Pretty
commentating.
star-studded commentary team, right?
Yeah, and there was some nice clips of Agassi touring, giving Nadal and Alcaraz a tour of Vegas and welcoming them. So that was also a nice, behind the scenes sort of footage that you got to see. But yeah, I would say as you probably saw in person, the lines calls were very dramatic.
There's a lot of bad lines calls.
Yeah,
and there was a lot of issues
waiting,
with
a lot of waiting.
a lot of waiting for the electronic system to actually work. Because
right.
I think the first time that they challenged, it didn't even show up. They had to like from the chair they
Someone
had to
called
say it.
Yeah.
And then the second time it did show up, but it took a while to actually show. And from there on, it kept being like that. It was just very slow.
Yeah.
So for that part, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But from the broadcast side, so I heard, social media, I saw a little bit of the fact that some people were kind of a little bit turned off with Agassi, the way that he was kind of with his like delivery. So there's two things with broadcasting, right? There's the actual knowledge, right? So how do you dissect the match and what kind of insights you can provide? So that's one aspect, and I think he killed it, like you were saying. I think a lot of people had really good opinions of his insight. But the other part of broadcasting is knowing when to talk and when to sort of wait, right? So let's say there's an important point happening or something like that, and then you as a broadcaster keep talking in the middle of the point or something. So I heard there was a lot of bit of that. Did you feel that way
there
or no?
was, but I'm not sure if it was Agassi. I think it was maybe there's another lady who was interviewing like some of the stars in the audience, and that was like during the points, which we were kind of missing. So there was a few small things like that, but I didn't think of it as it
so
took away from everything.
Yeah.
I mean it did interfere, but it wasn't something like a huge red flag for the production. I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. It's not like ESPN and how they do. Even the nice slow-mo replays are like very well done on ESPN or other channels, but I felt like it was a good first start. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I thought in person, I felt like I was missing out a lot. Like for example, I heard nothing of Agassi and Roddick and I actually even saw from the stands that Alcaraz and Nadal were actually being interviewed between games.
They were.
Right?
That was
and
nice.
We did not get to hear any of that in the stadium. So we don't know what they were talking about. So a little bit of FOMO in that sense.
Yeah, I tried to send you some pictures from the screen just to let you know, because there were like Nadal's kid was there and his wife.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool, and they showed.
I heard they sold the show.
Yeah. And then there's a few celebs there that were very notable. So
yeah. Christina was also, my wife was also watching and sending me some clips, and she sent me a picture of that of Rafa's kid and his wife and some other celebrities and stuff that they were showing. So I as an attendee, right, that was the part that I kind of missed out on. And I do gotta say, like, the production itself of the event was really cool, like in the tennis and how they sort of had these pre match competitions. Like there was kind of like an ace competition where Taylor Fritz, John Isner, Francis Tiafoe, and Sam Curry. Like I was not expecting Sam Curry. I thought he was retired for a while now.
They're playing pickleball.
How do you pronounce his last name? I've never been able to say it right.
I say Query.
Query? Sam Query.
Yeah.
I always get like
it's okay.
confused with how to say that. Anyhow, he was there. And it was kind of cool to see like these guys, having a little. It was kind of like a 3-point shootout type of thing that you see in the NBA. but just with aces. So it was a little fun thing to the event, and they even had a trophy for the winner, who was Taylor Fritz, by the way. Um, so that part of it was cool. I will say though, the they had a doubles match. There was one set before the actual aces competition, and by the time I got in, it was over because they started the event. They said they were going to start at 11:05, the doubles, and the doors opened at 11. There was only one entrance,
Oh my gosh.
and the lines were insane. So I was standing in line. It took me like 40 minutes to get into the stadium from the time I got into the lines, and I was there slightly before 11. Um, So, and I wasn't even like, I was like in the middle of the line. Like I wasn't at the back or anything like that. So I wonder how long it took people in the back. So I think they didn't really have a good grasp of what it means to,
Run something like
to
this.
to get people into a tennis match like this, because you should be able to get there beforehand and, buy a beer or buy food or whatever you want to do, right?
Right.
Um, and I found myself like just rushing to buy because it was also at lunchtime, so I was rushing to buy something to actually be able to get lunch, and missing the entire doubles, right? So that part of it I did not enjoy, but being there and seeing the tennis, and I gotta say, like the stadium was kind of nice in the sense that I was pretty far back, and even from there, it felt like a really good view. Like you can see from my picture, like I can
Sounds
clearly see
great.
Rafa and
Yeah.
and Alcaraz there, right? And I was pretty far back, so I think in that sense, it was a really nice experience. I think it was worth it to even get the cheap seats. Um, so really, really good experience. In terms of the tennis,
Oh,
I was the biggest thing that I was looking for was health, right? Like I was both Rafa and Alcaraz came into this tournament, this exhibition, with an injury concern, right? And for Rafa, it was the Brisbane injury that sort of, he had a injury on the same hip that he had an issue with, and it
it's like
turned
a
out not
micro
to be that
tear.
serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out not to be that serious compared to like last time, but it's still a concern. And he was trying to play in Doha, and he wasn't even able to make that as well. So I was wondering like how, if he was going to be fit at all, right? If he was going to be
Right.
able to move well. Actually, I was pretty surprised with his movement. He was pretty. I mean, he's obviously he's not the Rafa of old. He's slow comparatively, but I
Yeah.
think he was as fast as if he would have been healthy, right?
Do
Like,
you think he was backing off a little bit due to
oh
the
yeah,
surface and
absolutely,
this
yeah,
particular match?
yeah. I think the biggest thing that I saw in terms of their hesitation was on the fact of, when they had to go like through the corners, or if there was a drop shot that was very difficult to get to, they were definitely, pulling back a little bit. Um, so I think movement wise, they tried to move their best if it was a doable shot, but if it was a crazy shot, they wouldn't like. Normally, Alcaraz will like go for every single thing, right? The way he plays, he was not doing that in this event, for example. I actually thought Nadal was going for more than Alcaraz. I think Alcaraz was less willing to kind of, try to dig out these shots that were kind of impossible to get to that he normally tries. I think
Yeah,
Rafa was actually putting more effort into doing that.
I see.
I saw him doing it more front to back rather than laterally. Like for example, coming out of the corners, I don't think he put too much effort there, but definitely if Alcaraz did one of his drop shots or something, Nadal was trying to get there more often than Alcaraz, vice versa. So that was one thing, but they both did seem healthy to me. I think
That's
they
good.
are, especially Alcaraz. I was concerned because he just got injured. Like he got injured in, um, was it Rio? Yeah, in Rio.
Yeah.
Basically the second point of the match, right? So I was wondering, is he going to be ready for Indian Wells? Because he is defending a lot of points. He is defending champion in Indian Wells, and he's having a really rough stretch. So we'll cover that a little bit later, but um, it was a big thing to see that he was able to move well. So that was the big thing that stood out to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I thought their play was pretty amazing though. just to watch them go back and forth. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit of your perspective? Like, were they, like, some of those winners were amazing. How was the crowd?
The crowd was going crazy. I mean, they were like 80% or more for Rafa in this match, which is rare for Alcaraz now, right? Because Alcaraz is the guy who he draws all the crowds and all that. But Rafa's a legend in the sport, right? So it's a little bit different. And it's kind of like the goodbye tour for Rafa too.
You think he's getting like the Federer treatment for when
Nadal?
It's Federer? Yeah.
I think so. I mean, he is the closest thing in terms of the love of the public, right? To Federer. I mean, obviously, when Federer was around, he was the one doing that, and Rafa would be kind of the second person. Now that Roger's gone and Rafa is kind of like thinking about retirement, now everybody's like behind him. So, but I think Alcaraz didn't mind that. I think he was having fun with it. In terms of like the interactions, like this is an exhibition, right? So things that like, for example, the Alcaraz against Djokovic match, definitely they took it seriously, and it was actually, I would say, even higher quality than this match. But they did have a lot of playful exchanges, right? And they had like, trying to one up each other and playing fun like that. And I think Rafa really is not that kind of guy. Like he was out there and he looked like he was actually playing. Yeah, he was playing a really, and Alcaraz wanted to win too. No, don't get me wrong, but he would do like daring things. Like there was a running forehand that Alcaraz did against Djokovic in their match that he wouldn't really try that and for real. And he actually nailed it in the corner in the line. And Djokovic was looking at him like, what, did you really just do that? And they were just laughing. Like there was nothing like that in this match. And I saw Alcaraz trying to do that a little bit. Like he was trying to like smile at him, Nadal when either of them made like great points. Nadal was all serious, ignoring stuff and cursing when he was doing like really bad things. And so that felt like a little bit more serious on the Nadal side.
Well, it's great that you got to see a very competitive exhibition match.
Oh yeah, like this. For sure. Yeah, and I think their shot making, like it wasn't the best. They had some stretches of really bad errors and shanks and stuff, but they also had some really, really amazing shots. I mean,
oh my gosh, and that
tiebreak, the match point that Rafa saved, just that by itself is worth the admission.
Yeah,
that's match point that he said. It was a crazy slapping forehand that he hit. Just past Alcaraz, and he was down. Like match point down, and he was like Alcaraz just like, did you really just do that right now? So it was good, and they did have a few like that, and overall I saw that in the first set, like Nadal was being very aggressive and having a lot of like his forehand was the main weapon of the first set.
It was so great to see.
He hit so many good ones. And I felt like in the second set it actually reversed. Like it was Alcaraz the one who was like just slapping forehands left and right. So, and even a few backhands too, he hit really well.
I remember you texting me like halfway through the second. It was like, are these things rigged? Because one person has to win one set, one person has to win.
Yeah, you got to get your money for it, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of facetious saying that, but who knows? Maybe it's true.
Yeah, it could be.
It could be true, because it seems to happen a lot, right? Although to be fair, the exhibitions that Alcaraz played against Tommy Paul and Roberto Bautista Agut and all this, he won them in straight sets, so maybe not. But
okay.
Yeah, but I guess at least against Nadal and Djokovic, they've been like very long, but. It was good. It's a great experience overall, and I think it's good for both of them going into Indian Wells because
this is a great warm up actually.
It's a great warm up, and we're gonna talk about the draw in the other episode, but spoiler alert, Rafa has a pretty tough first few matches.
Yeah.
So it's good that he had this practice, competitive practice.
Yeah.
Seeing where he is at, right. I think a few positives on the Alcaraz side. I would say that his serve continues to improve. It's still not where it needs to be. His spot serving is still something he needs to work on. It's going to take time. But man, he was hitting some bombs in that match. So I think he continues to work on that, and he's going to need to. He needs to win cheaper points and not depend so much on rallies. So that was a positive there. But at the same time, he also had a lot of double faults, so it's up and down. It's a little inconsistent with Alcaraz since in the last 6 months, and that's something that I'm going to be paying attention to come Indian Wells. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about this match before we move on to other topics?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's great to see Nadal back.
Yeah.
And I'm a little upset he lost.
Yeah.
But it was so close towards the end. It could have gone either way. But
Definitely.
yeah, good stuff. I'm glad actually to see. It's refreshing to see a exhibition match to be at this high level.
Oh, yeah.
Even though there were some spurts where there's lapses in their concentration, but it really felt like a real test for both of them, which you normally sometimes don't see in an exhibition match. So, like you said, it's great practice for them going into the Indian Wells this week.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, since we're talking about Alcaraz, maybe we could segue into how sort of his February went, right? And why we were so concerned and also, I guess, an expectation to see how well he was playing in this event. And the two events that he did play after in Australian Open loss to Alexander Zverev were the South American clay court events that he normally plays. And he didn't win either of them. So he is still titleless since Wimbledon last year. He's had a good runs in some of these tournaments, U.S. Open semis. That's great. Cincinnati final against Djokovic was probably the best Masters 1000 final or just match of last year.
Yeah.
So no shame there. But actual titles, it's been zero, right, since Wimbledon. A little concerning, and I think his loss to Nicholas Jarry was very concerning in terms of, Jarry is tough, and he actually he played tough Alcaraz last year in the same event. And Alcaraz was able to win that in 3 sets and eventually win the title. But this time he actually wasn't really able to put it together, and he lost in straight sets. And I don't think he had lost in straight sets in a while, right? If I remember correctly, or maybe he did lose to Sinner in straight sets when they played in the fall events.
Okay.
But very rarely, right? And that's straight set loss against Jarry, a little concerning to me. His level is just not very consistent right now. And then he had that event, the tournament in Rio, right? So that happened in Buenos Aires, the loss to Jarry. And then in Rio, he actually played 2 points and got injured. And then he tried to play a little bit more. He actually broke serve somehow that way, but then he couldn't hold his own serve and stopped the match at 1-1 in the first match of Rio. So lost in the semifinal against Jarry, which on paper, like, that can happen. So it's not incredibly concerning, but then the injury scare. What do you think of Alcaraz? Are we worried about him moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to give some context, I was also a little worried when he lost to Zverev in the Australian Open, because I thought of that performance to be, he had a really bad start to that match, and then he tried to pull it together, and I think it didn't really, it was just too late, and he can't have these lapses of concentration or just lacks, I guess, what's the right word? Just poor performance and for like a set or two. He can't do that, I think, at this level. And I think his shot selections, he has everything in his game. It's just putting it together, which I think, actually during the Netflix slam, they had interviewed Juan Carlos Ferrero about him, and that's kind of what he mentioned, is like at an early age he had all the shots, he had a lot of power. It's all about harnessing it and putting it in the right sequence and order, which I think he still needs to develop, to do that more consistently. He's obviously shown it in Wimbledon and like these huge stages before, so just keeping it consistent. I am not super worried, but I do feel like he's gonna look back and maybe think of it as some missed opportunities, because he has the high level. He just has to get his head together. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. No, I agree, and it's interesting because he has such a big, magnified glass on him.
Yeah.
Everything that he does is
a little bit of
dissected. It's the pressure, but it's also the fact that, if we compare last year, like the fall, where he was criticized a lot with his level, right? If we compare that season to, let's say, the previous season, 2022, where he won the U.S. Open, right?
Right.
If we take post Wimbledon, to sort of the beginning of the year up to this point, up to after the Australian Open, right? The only event that he really actually played better was the U.S. Open in 2022. He actually did worse in all of those events. And he lost early in both Cincinnati and Toronto. I think he lost to Tommy Paul both times, or maybe one of those with Tommy Paul and somebody else the other. And so he lost earlier than last year. And last year he actually made the final in Cincinnati and lost to Djokovic in an incredible match, right? So no shame. U.S. Open was the one that he did worse, right? Because he lost to Medvedev in the semis. And Medvedev played like amazing. I thought Alcaraz was actually playing that U.S. Open better than he did the previous year, up till that point, right? Until that semifinal. And he didn't have to run into Medvedev in the year that he won it. So big difference there. And then in the fall, like he did absolutely nothing in 2022. Absolutely nothing. So 2023 was actually progress in pretty much all of those tournaments except the U.S. Open. So even like the Tour Finals, he didn't play in 2022. He actually got to the semis in last year in his worst surface, including a win over Medvedev, who's good indoors. So
yeah,
I think in a way, up to this point, I've always tried to keep perspective. Like he's actually progressing. He's actually doing better in these events, in these parts of the years that he's actually struggling, but he's been doing better each year. This is the first time that I'm concerned. Like after this South American swing that lost to Jerry, now I'm really interested to see what's going to happen in Indian Wells. Indian Wells is like the Carlos Alcaraz Masters. Like the tournament just feels perfect for him because the conditions are, very slow. It's very exactly. It's a clay court if you ask Medvedev. And he absolutely crushed everyone last year in this tournament. It was just an absolute domination that I have not seen from anybody in 2 years. It was that good. Like and the players that he beat were quality players. Like he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime. He beat when he was still good. He beat Yannick Sinner in the semifinals, straight sets. People forget that he beat Yannick Sinner last year. He did beat Yannick Sinner last year. It was in Indian Wells. And then he absolutely just put a show against Medvedev, like a clinic on how to beat Medvedev. Right. If he doesn't produce that this year, which is his best event, at least on the hard courts, I am going to be genuinely concerned, and I think it's going to be a rough year for him. Because I think that's also going to hit his confidence, which is already hit pretty hard. With this thing that he was trying to catch Djokovic and wasn't able to do it, and now everybody's talking about him. If he doesn't perform to that level in the world, that's where I'm going to be concerned. So I'm really, really interested to see if this is going to just trigger something in him of, hey, these are good memories, and maybe he'll find his level there. Kind of like with Nadal, right? Like he could play like absolute garbage the entire year, and then he goes to French Open, and he's like 25% better player automatically, right? Like it just
Yeah.
comes, the good feelings come back, right? I'm wondering if this is something that's going to happen with Alcaraz now and
Mm.
Indian Wells. So that is the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to for him and moving into Indian Wells.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, even after this Nadal match, you feel a little worried.
I do.
Yeah.
It is an exhibition, and you know they're not going like super fast. So
Mm.
I am concerned a little
Okay.
bit, but I will hold my concern
Okay.
up to the end of Indian Wells. So we shall see. And you know, I already made my predictions for the tournament, so we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But we shall see. We shall see what we expect from Alcaraz. Okay, anything else before we move on to another topic?
I think that's it for Alcaraz. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I did mention that we had two really huge events, right? That's supposed to be huge events, but they don't feel like it because of where they are in the calendar. Um, in the
Right.
WTA, right? We had Doha and we had Dubai. And I think big picture for me, what I want the listeners to take from this is I think Iga and Rybakina are still the best players in the world with Sabalenka, right? Sabalenka, the spoiler alert, right? She wasn't really present in any of these tournaments in February. She played one match, lost it early, and that was it. So, but I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt because she just won the Australian Open. So, I am zero concern for Sabalenka moving forward. Apart from that, it's very clear that Iga is still, you know, one of the players to beat, and she seems to be the queen of Doha. She's won it 3 times in a row now. But I think the most important thing was who she beat in that final, and it was Elena Rybakina. She's had a really poor head-to-head against her recently,
Right.
and it's not really been competitive with her. So this was a big victory for Iga, I think, and it really sort of lays um, sort of a good sort of rest of the year in terms of competition. Because I was going to get worried that Iga was going to be a little bit more relevant outside of the clay in terms of
Mm-hmm.
actually winning these titles. But I think she could actually compete, and I think the changes in her game have really helped her. So, any initial thoughts on the women's side there?
Yeah, I think that was in Qatar. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was a great match. It was a crazy tiebreak too in the first set, I believe. It was like 10-8.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
I saw that entire match, and um, Rybakina went up really big in the beginning. She actually had 2 breaks up,
oh my
and
gosh,
Iga found a way to come back. Rybakina had like a weird like self injury,
she
serving like
hit her shin, right?
yeah, she hit her shin
Yeah, and then it kind
after
of went
serving her shin.
downhill.
She kind of derailed a little bit. Like it wasn't
Yeah,
like she was impeded by it, but it was more like mental.
I
Like
think it was
ooh,
mental. Yeah,
yeah. And that really helped Iga.
it's kind of unfortunate actually.
It is really unfortunate. Yeah,
The finals. Yeah.
exactly. But I think, you know, the thing for me that was impressive from Iga was that she said last year, I'm gonna change a few things on my game just to counter these big hitters, right? She's had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trouble, particularly with Rybakina and Ostapenko, but you know, obviously Sabalenka is a threat as well, and she has beaten Iga a few more times recently than before. So she has shortened her swing a little bit. She has a huge tape back, right? Because she has that Rafa forehand with a
Okay.
bunch of
Mm.
spin and all that. But the problem with it is that you get a little rushed with it, right? You need time to set that up, and these big hitters have just been rushing her too much. So she's learning to take that swing a little bit faster, and have that take back be a little bit less
Shorter.
pronounced.
Yeah.
So and that's I think that really helped a lot. Like it felt like she was just redirecting a lot
Mm.
from Rybakina, whereas in the past she was trying to out hit Rybakina
Okay.
and just go for it. and it was just producing a massive amount of errors. So this time she corrected that, and I think her serve also, like her serve has improved. It's never going to be at the level of Rybakina and Sabalenka, right? But it's a little bit more, it's a little bit faster, and it feels a little flatter too. So I think she's doing a better job of getting the most of it. Um, and I think those two things were really important. And she, in the second set, she actually just cruised against Rybakina, and it was a lot about her being very smart. She was going for her shot still, but she was being smart about it. Like not trying to out hit Rybakina, more of waiting for her opportunity to attack. So I think the adjustments that were made give me a lot of confidence in the ability of her to really find a way out of these tough situations. For a little while, Iga was winning too easy. Like she wouldn't even like the bakery became famous, right? She kept getting bagels and breadsticks all over the place, and winning in straight sets very often. And every time she had a challenge, it was difficult for her to actually deal with the nerves because she was never in those matches, right? And I think now she's doing a better job of, even if when she loses against these players, she's able to learn from it and sort of change. So that definitely that loss in Australia didn't mean too much. And we talked about that. She had a rough draw. I didn't really feel like it was anything meaningful. And she proved it. She got a title in Doha, and then in Dubai she got to the semis. She lost there. She was a little bit burnt out, she said, but really good results, right? Finals and semifinals, or title and semifinals. Right. Really good stuff. And Rybakina, she won a title. She got to the finals in Doha, and I think again proving that those are the two, and with
top players,
with Sabalenka and Coco, those are the best players. And I would really say the big three there. I think Coco's more of a she's kind of like. She beats who she needs to beat, but I feel like she's always at a disadvantage against these three players. Yeah. She's going to be more consistent at Rybakina, and likely is always going to be a little bit higher ranked. But I think Rybakina, when she has a good week, she could just beat anyone. So, yeah. Any additional thoughts there on the state on the women's tennis moving into Indian Wells? I think for me, what I mentioned was I learned that these are the best players, and I think those are the ones to look out for in Indian Wells. And I would be shocked if one of those three do not win it.
Ooh, bold prediction.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's too bold, really.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I think that wraps that up.
Cool. Okay, so we want to move on to what do you want to do next? So one of the things that I have here is on the men's side, right? We do have this particular player. Undefeated. Oh. You can see him behind on your screen, Mr. Yannick Sinner. So Yannick Sinner is still undefeated because he did win in where did he win? He won in I have it here. Give me 1 second. Sinner won and I can't find it. He did win his Rotterdam. So he did win in a 500 level event in Rotterdam.
Right. That was against de Minaur, right?
And he beat Alex de Minaur in that final.
Yeah.
And what do you thought from Sinner?
Oh, clinic. I mean, he's hitting the ball so clean. It's just fun to watch. I think that final against de Minaur in Rotterdam was a really impressive final from both players, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of great points, long points, and Alcaraz. Ooh, Sinner keeps impressing me with his patience. Actually, I think he's able to withstand all of these very difficult shots. He's playing great defense, and he pulls the trigger at the right time. It's almost like Medvedev, but a more assertive Medvedev sometimes, I feel. Or assertive Djokovic.
Honestly, I would say is more Djokovic.
Right. It says,
Yeah. He is. I think Sinner is the first player that from the young generation, right, that plays just like Djokovic.
As a Sinner fan, I don't agree with that.
Well, just look at the game, right? It's
I know.
there are very few players that can slide on the hard courts like he can, especially on that backhand, right? Getting out of that backhand wing.
Oh God.
I don't see anybody else apart than Djokovic doing that. And Sinner does it even more than Djokovic, I feel like now.
Oh my gosh. Amazing to watch.
And that is so important because when you're able to slide like that, you actually are able to stop at that point and you don't have to like overrun, right? This, just for the listeners to kind of understand why this is important. It's the fact that you're able to slide, the timing and sliding into the shot, and then you're ready to defend the next point without having to come back too far, right? So that is a huge advantage defensively because you also don't exert as much energy. And Sinner's doing that so perfectly now. And the thing is that his backhand in general, just forget the sliding, his backhand is just an absolute weapon. And it always has been, and it continues to be. It's just the consistency has improved so much on both sides, especially on the forehand side. He's so reliable. You almost feel like he can never miss. And when he misses once, he hits 3 winners right after that. So it's just an impressive level.
He's very fearless right now. Just amazing to watch. Yeah.
And it's almost like no drama, right? When I see a Sinner match, it's just clinical. It's just I don't see any.
He's in a great headspace. He's like hitting his spots. He has a game plan, or he figures it out as he goes. But it's pretty amazing to watch right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and the amount of times I felt so bad for Diminar because the amount of times in that match that he got passed. Diminar was trying to like serve and volley a few times, come in, and he's actually pretty good at it.
He is.
But man, Sinner was just on fire with that pass, especially the backhand pass.
There's a few cross courts. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So great.
It was great to watch, and honestly, he seems like the player to beat from now to I don't know when, right? He seems like the best player in the world right now. We haven't seen Djokovic since Australia.
I'm so glad he said that out loud.
Yeah, I mean it's the reality. He seems like the best player in the world right now. Yeah. I still think Alcaraz can be like that again, but he has a lot to work on right now to just be consistent. And I think coming into Indian Wells, we're going to learn a lot.
Isn't that a little bit ironic because a few U.S. Opens ago when Alcaraz won it, we were probably saying the opposite.
Yeah. Right? It's because Sinner wasn't proving that he could win in the biggest stages against the biggest players. And now it's not, that's what he does.
He's improved so well.
I mean, he's now like 10-1 against like the top 5 in the last 6 months. It's absurdity, right? And we're talking Medvedev, Djokovic, and Alcaraz. So he's not beating like just any players 10-1. It's the best players 10-1, right, in the last 11 matches. So he's the best player right now in the world. There's no question about that. So I will be very interested to see what happens in Indian Wells. We're going to learn a lot. But going into Indian Wells, Sinner is a player to watch, and especially because he's still undefeated. So it would be really interesting to see because he's actually very good in Miami. His is probably his best Masters event. So if he can muster a bit more than he did last year in Indian Wells, he got to the semis last year, right? Lost to Alcaraz, and then got to the final. He could be on for the Sunshine Double. If he can find a way to win Indian Wells, he could be on for the Sunshine Double. So, and that would be amazing because it's been a while since we have somebody go so deep into the season undefeated like this. I guess last time it was Nadal, right? He got to the Indian Wells final and lost there.
And then lost there.
Before that, it was a Djokovic run.
Yeah,
and he got all the way to that semifinal against Federer. And that's where he lost his first match.
That was in Roland Garros, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Roland Garros. What did I say?
No, you just.
Oh, I did. Okay, I thought I just said something dumb.
No. I think you just said semifinal, but yeah, the Roland Garros one. Yeah.
There you
go. Just clarifying.
See, my listeners can see see my thoughts, right?
I vividly remember that match.
Yeah, that was the
with the pointers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love that that reaction
so
from
good.
Federer at the
Yeah.
end. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Sinner can continue that run. So I do want to sort of shout out. We were talking about Diminar. He played
Yeah.
fantastic in
He's.
February, and he has a horrendous head-to-head against Sinner,
Hmm.
and he lost again to him. But I thought he was
He's
very
improving.
competitive
Yeah.
against Sinner. Like he made him earn that match, and in the past, it's been very one-sided. And I think that says a lot because Sinner is even better now than he was then, right? When he
Yeah.
was beating Diminar easily before.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was actually very competitive, maybe more than before, tells you how much Diminar has improved.
Absolutely.
And he is beating the players that he needs to beat. Like even players that used to be kind of the guys that we looked up to, right? Like say Tsitsipas,
Yeah, he had
he's
that.
beating him, right? Um,
No one beats him 11 times now.
exactly.
That's what
So so that's the thing, right? Like he's clearly elevating. This is not a fluke. I think, and I think Diminar is. I will go as far as to say you don't want to see him in your draw. Like if he's in your draw, you are a potential upset alert, automatically because that's how good he is right now. So huge shout out to him. He actually won in Acapulco. He defended his title from last year, and he actually beat another player that we should sort of give a shout out to.
Let's do it.
Casper Ruud.
Casper Ruud.
Yeah. The 250 King actually plays pretty well in this 500 level event.
There
he
you
also
go.
played well 250 in the week before.
He's leveling up.
And man, I gotta say, this is
he's
day and night compared to last year. He was absolutely atrocious, outside the clay last year, and he's already improved a lot. He played 2 finals. He lost both of them, so not the best result there. But making 2 finals on a hard court, I think that's a huge improvement for him, and it looks good moving into 2 tournaments in the Sunshine Double. That he's had some success in the past, particularly in Miami. He made the final 2 years ago, so I think he's coming in with confidence. And he is also somebody that you don't really want to see on your side of the draw, depending on who you are, right? Like Zverev wouldn't want to see him or something like that. But yeah, shout out to Diminar there. I think Ruud also deserved that shout out. I want to give a shout out to one more player that really impressed in February, and that would be Ugo Humbert. And he is worth mentioning not only because he won 2 tournaments, and he did so beating multiple top 10 players. He beat Hurkacz a few times. He beat Medvedev in the semifinals. So that was an impressive run. And
there's some close matches though, but he was really good.
And the thing is that he's always been talked about as having that type of talent, but not really being able to put it together consistently. So if this is consistency now he's won 2 titles in a row beating top players, then it will be very interesting to see what he can do into these bigger events in Indian Wells and in Miami. Can he be a guy to watch, right? So that is something that we will discuss in the draw a bit more carefully, see where he lands and what is the potential there. But just somebody that I think deserves a shout out as a player to watch moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to cover in terms of players?
I just mentioned a fluke default by Rublev.
Yeah, we probably should touch upon that.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
He deserved it. I mean, he actually a while back I got to see Rublev play in the qualies of Montreal, and he lost in that quali match. And when he's losing, his temper sometimes is just out of control, and you can see it. It doesn't really work well in tennis to have a temper, and he definitely lost it there and started yelling at the linesman, which there's always tough calls in tennis, but you got to keep your head, at least on when you're when you're on the court, and he kind of lost it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is something that honestly it was easy to see coming in the sense of, he does a lot of self-harm. Like it's always been self-harm.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've always criticized of players like, let's say, Zverev or Kyrgios or players like that, is that these outbursts can get somebody hurt, right? So Rublev has been kind of given a pass a lot because all of his ire is directed at himself.
Yeah.
So he's cut himself a few times, hitting himself with the racket and things like that, right? But this is still a temper issue, and at some point, it was going to be directed at someone. It was just a matter of time, right? And we saw that now, and I just hope that he gets the help he needs. He has very, very tough time controlling his temper.
I think it's been going on throughout his whole career, which is more concerning, honestly, because that was before he was ever in the top 10, or I think that was the year when he ended up beating Federer and just making his scene is when I saw him, and he was definitely doing the same, same sort of.
No, it's always been
behavior.
He's always been like this, always. But the fact that he does it a lot, self-harm, he's been given a pass for it. But honestly, like even the self-harm thing, like there has to be a rule. So let's say that he cuts himself by hitting his knee or something with a racket. He's delaying the match, right? And the other player is getting cold. There should be some penalty for that. It can't be like, oh, because it was directed at himself, then there's no penalty. I feel like that's not fair, too.
If it's intentional. Like he's frustrated, intentionally frustrated.
Exactly. Like let's say he's frustrated and he hits himself on the knee and bleeds, and now we have 10-minute pause because we need to, cure up his leg so he can stop bleeding, and not get blood on the court. That's a disruption to the other player, right?
Yeah, so absolutely.
That's the kind of thing. Like I feel like the rule has to be a little bit more strict in this, because also you can't just have people self-harming this often and derailing themselves and derailing matches. It's crazy, and people are paying expensive tickets to watch these matches, and he got defaulted on a semifinal, and it was very tight. Like he could have won that match. Like it was still on serve. There's no reason for him to just quit like that, essentially on himself, by screaming at the line judge. And I think he was also wrong on the thing he was doing. I don't remember if it was actually confirmed or not. He actually did win an appeal on this, though. Did you see that?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
So he actually is going to get his prize money reinstated, and I think the points as well, because he originally had been disqualified, and also he got removed from the points and the money from reaching the semifinal. So now it got reinstated again. Which I honestly, I haven't really looked too closely at the nuance to see if that was the right decision or not. But I think that it's not the important thing here. The important thing here is this is a really consistent pattern of behavior from him, and it's only a matter of time if it gets worse, and it's only a matter of time that he does it in a bigger event, like let's say in a quarterfinal of a Grand Slam where he has a really big shot to finally getting to the semifinals, and then does something like that, right? So I think he really does need to try to get help for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so that's kind of news updates. So maybe we could end the podcast with some news related things and close it out. And then maybe I'll also give a shout out to a few young players at the end. But let's continue on the news side.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about Halep here?
Yeah. You want to go for it?
Yeah. So interesting news that Halep has now been cleared to play. Cleared from her ban. So she was given a 4-year ban from, the WTA and playing professional tennis due to basically a doping incident. Two of them, which happened in her around August 2022, as well as a bit later on. So it's a complicated story. I think we probably both of us have to do some reading up on this, but it seemed that she was unknowingly taking a supplement that led her to ingest this roxadustat is the name of the drug that apparently elevates your EPO, which helps you, perform better. Now, the controversial part is that, she may have unknowingly taken it, but where did it come from? And it seemed like it could have come from her coach and her staff, her own team. Mm-hmm. So double checking sort of all of that. And, as a tennis player, you really have to make sure you know what you're taking. And this is one of those cases where the team kind of failed. And I think the sad part is that in all of this, which this is my personal opinion, is that no one's really been taken, no one's responsible for, like, actually held accountable for it, mm-hmm. Which, tennis in general, like as your team, how it functions and how these anti-doping agencies are going about this, that this was a very crucial time in her career. She was playing very well, and then for her to have this, or at least get it resolved very quickly, would be beneficial for everyone, obviously. But it took almost a year and a half to get this resolved. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I guess based on if she did it unknowingly, this is the assumption, right? This is quite of a long, investigation for the whole thing to come out clear. They basically had the 4-year ban. They lowered it down to 9 months, but she's already, served that time for 9 months, so she's ready to play right away if she wants to. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my initial take, but obviously I'll read up more and get back to you guys in the next episode.
Yeah, same.
Do you have any initial thoughts, Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, initially before we heard this news that, just came out recently, I was leaning to, like, she probably knew what she was doing. And the reason was because it was 2 offenses, right?
2 offenses,
one was an actual drug test failure. The other one was kind of like irregularity in the blood. It was more like a predictive thing. And both of those are independent of each other. So they're 2 separate offenses, essentially. So that sort of told me that, if you have 2, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But now that, there are more I know that there are more nuances that came out from this article, that we got to look more carefully to make a kind of like a final opinion. I'm still going to be reserving judgment in that sense. I do agree, though, 100% that it is a big shame that the coaching staff here does not basically got unscathed from this, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Patrick Mouratoglou, he's getting a lot of publicity for his, UTS event and, this coaching situation with Rune, which we'll come to talk right after this. Also involving Patrick Mouratoglou. We see him everywhere, and he's such a self-promoter and all that. But where is the accountability of what happened to Halep, right? Because clearly, like you said, the team failed here, regardless if it was on purpose or just by being careless or whatever. And granted, I mean, Halep deserves blame too for not confirming whatever she's putting on her body, whatever it is. But she shouldn't be the only one here being under the microscope.
Yeah.
Um, and
At
I
least the
think,
focus of attention. You're right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think she should share that with
Hmm.
Maratoglu and the other members of the team.
Yeah.
So, and it's a shame because for many years she actually became successful with Cahill, right?
Yeah.
Um, and now look at how Sinner's doing with Cahill, and
Amazing.
she
Yeah.
moved on to Maratoglu later on, and um, it's just been a mess, right? And we've seen
Yeah.
how that was a bit of a mess with Serena for a little while as well.
Yeah.
They
The
had a lot of
coaching
success too, but
issues.
they
Yeah.
had some issues as well. And
Hmm.
now we're seeing it with Rune. So it's it's a little bit of a mess at the moment with Martoglu, and the fact that he's not getting any blame for this is just I don't like it personally. Um, and I wish that there was more spotlight on him with this situation. But with Halep, I'll read up a little bit more on it, and I'll sort of expand on my thoughts when the next time when that we record a full episode. Um, yeah, that's all I have for that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was a big Halep fan before all of this, so I'm just glad that she gets to compete, hopefully without doping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it'll be interesting
Yeah.
to see if she can
Yeah.
get back
Yeah.
to competitiveness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Let's
maybe
see.
let's close out the news section with the same guy, right? With Patrick
Okay.
Martoglu. So just on a quick thought on the Rune situation. I mean, he had this is the third time he's teaming up with Martoglu, um, and he also had a dream team of coaches
Hmm.
that signed up and sort
Then,
of
yeah.
left him before we were able to record again. So it was
Right.
insane. So
Right.
he had was it Becker and Luti in the team?
Yeah. I think you're
So in
right.
Luti, and both of them were sort of basically saying that they were not able
Yeah,
to
that's from Federer's camp.
from Federer's camp. Yeah, so he
Yeah.
had Federer's coach, he had Djokovic's coach.
Yeah, which honestly I was like, oh wow, that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah,
See how that plays out. But
exactly.
something didn't click, I guess, or something happened.
Yeah, there was just some miscommunication because they were saying that they could not, like Becker and Severin Luti could not travel as much as Rune wanted, and Rune wanted them to be there
Okay.
with him, right, when on the dates, which is obviously understandable. But how do you not, agree on this beforehand, right? It's just like, where's how is it this got lost in translation here?
Yeah.
So it's just a bad look, and um, I'm hoping that Rune gets his act together because he was the third exciting player of the young players, right? It was Alcaraz, it was Sinner, and Rune was the third
Yeah,
guy
you're right.
that we were like, this guy might be, the next deal as well. But he's been a little bit quiet, right? He did have a decent indoor season. He was not as good as he was the year before, but respectable. But other than that, he's been pretty bad since he left the clay last year. And he's traditionally not very good in the sunshine double, so I'm expecting him to struggle a little bit more
Mm.
until we get to Monte Carlo and see what happens there. But I'm hoping he finds his form again. He's really good. He's a really good player overall, and he has belief. Like he's a guy who, I mean, he beats Djokovic a few times already, including
Yeah.
in the final of a Masters 1000. I mean, that's a huge. Not everybody can do that. So I would like to see him just get some stability, right? Because this coaching situation doesn't seem very healthy.
I agree. Yeah.
No. Okay.
Right.
Last thing, this is going to be a quick mention only for listeners. There was a few young, exciting players that also were kind of
Let's hear
shining
it. Yeah.
in the month of February. And I think the big guy there is Jacob Mensik, because he was a guy who in the juniors was really highly touted, and now that he's actually playing on the tour, he actually went on a huge run, and he beat Andy Murray in a very tight match, and I think he ended up losing in the final, but in one of the tournament, I think it was like a 250 event, but he was the show for a little while. And on the other side, there's this guy last name Acosta. Um, he can you look up the full name from this guy while I sort of give my thoughts here.
Sure.
Um, he was playing in the clay court swing in South America and in Buenos Aires, and that guy has real talent. I mean, he's only about like 18 or 19, but he has the type of game that is very easy power, a little bit like Sinner, like it kind of like that kind of player. Um, but he's very good on clay. That's like
The
his big surface.
Argentinian, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, his name is Facundo Diaz Acosta.
yeah, yeah. So he was a big storyline, and then Mencic as well. Jacob Mencic. Sorry, Mencic. I keep saying Mencic.
Yeah.
Mencic. Jacob
Yeah.
Mencic. So those two guys, listeners, if you haven't seen them, take a little bit of time to watch them because they could be factors in Indian Wells and Miami. And Acosta in particular might be more of a factor when we start the clay swing in Monte Carlo. So players to watch.
Nice.
Okay.
All right.
Jish, you want to wrap things up?
Let's do it.
Before we close out the episode, I did want to sort of to give a plug. So as I mentioned, we are going to be covering the Indian Wells draw. We're also going to be covering the Miami draw when it comes out. We're going to do short episodes. These are going to be new things that we do this year. We're going to have short episodes. We're going to target 10 minutes. We'll be 10 to 15 minutes.
We'll do it.
The idea is to just quickly give an overview of the most important highlights of the draw, who's important there, who are the potential upsets, who had the easiest versus the hardest draw, that kind of thing. So we're going to cover all of that and also give our predictions as we always do. But it's going to be a shorter format that should be a little bit easier to digest, I guess. And we'll give you kind of all the information you need going into these Masters events. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to have the first one releasing tomorrow. And then the one in Miami, once the draw is out, we'll record that and post it as well. And our next final full episode would be post Miami to do a full recap of both events. So we won't have a post Indian Wells only. We'll have a post Sunshine double episode, and we'll cover both in that larger episode. But we will have those two previews, shorter versions.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll give our thoughts on the Indian Wells draw very shortly, like tomorrow. So, I'll if you like what you heard, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. So you can receive all the latest episodes as they become live. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and most other podcasting platforms. So please leave us a rating and a review. We'd appreciate your feedback to make this podcast the best it can be. We're also on Twitter and Reddit at Point by Point Pod, as well as YouTube at Point by Point Tennis Podcast. And with that, we'll wrap up another episode of the podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. See ya.